A student answers many questions in class. Another student sits quietly, listens carefully, takes notes, and only speaks when they are sure they have something useful to say. So, which one do you think is more engaged? That question is more complicated than it first appears. In TESOL, we often talk about engagement as if it means visible participation. Speaking more, putting your hands up, joining discussion, producing language, or staying on task. And of course, those things can matter and do matter, but they do not tell you the whole story. So, in this episode, I want to look at engagement in TESOL, what it means, why teachers can sometimes misread it, and how we can design learning that does more than simply keep students busy. Well, what we need to consider is this, that engagement is not just visible activity. It is the depth and quality of learners' involvement in learning. One useful way to understand engagement is to see that it has several sides. And there is what learners visibly do. For example, speaking, writing, asking questions, completing the task. But there is also what they are thinking, whether they are paying attention, processing language, solving problems, or making connections. There's also the social side, how learners listen, respond, collaborate, and support one another. There's also the agency side, whether they take initiative to ask for help, express needs, or shape the task in some way. And there is the emotional side, whether they feel interested, anxious, confident, bored, connected, or excluded. So that gives us a much richer picture. It also gives us a warning. Engagement is not always easy to see, and that's true. A quiet student may be thinking very deeply. A confident student may be speaking a lot without really processing much. A learner may look disengaged because they're anxious, or they're unsure of the task, or worried about making mistakes. So the central tension is this. Engagement is often treated as visible classroom activity, but what matters really is the kind and depth of involvement the activity creates. This matters because language learning needs more than exposure. This is where language acquisition research gives us a useful reminder. Learners do not develop simply because language is present. They need interaction, attention, feedback, and meaningful use. That is why engagement is very central to language learning. But here is what we need to be aware of. We can design activities that look engaging without producing deep engagement. And that's very important. A lively pair work activity may generate noise, movement, and lots of talking. But are learners actually listening to each other and stretching their language? On the other hand, a quiet reading or reflection task may look less exciting, but it might involve careful attention, inference, vocabulary noticing, and serious cognitive engagement. So the better question is not, are students active? In fact, the better question is, what kind of engagement is this activity creating? Let's make that practical. One example is speaking task. If learners are asked to discuss a topic, behavioral engagement might mean they are talking. But deeper engagement depends on the design. Do they have a reason to listen? Do they need to respond to one another? Is there a problem to solve, a choice to make, or a meaning to negotiate? How emotionally are they engaged? If not, the task may become turn-taking rather than real interaction. Another example is feedback. When learners receive written comments, for example, they may look passive, right? But if they are asked to identify one pattern, choose one revision priority, and explain what they will change next time, feedback becomes much more active. They are not just receiving corrections, they're using them. So a third example is group work. Group work does not automatically create engagement, and that's a very important point to remember. Some learners may dominate, others may disappear, and everyone may complete the task without much language development. But if rules are clear, the task requires interdependence, and learners have to pool knowledge, then group work can support social and cognitive engagement. This connects with our videos on scaffolding because engagement is about giving learners the right kind of support so they can participate in something slightly beyond what they could do alone. So there are also some common misunderstandings here that we need to be aware of. The first is that engagement means speaking. In TESOL, speaking is important, but silence is not always disengagement. In some contexts, attentive listening is a valued form of participation. Some learners need time before speaking. Others may be engaged internally before they are ready to contribute publicly. The second misunderstanding to remember is that engagement means enjoyment. Enjoyment can help, but a fun task is not automatically a useful task. Language learning can involve effort, uncertainty, repetition, and struggle. A learner can be challenged and engaged without being constantly entertained. The third misunderstanding is that engagement is just the learner's responsibility. Learners do bring motivation, confidence, histories, and preferences, but engagement is also shaped by task design, classroom relationships, assessment pressures, cultural expectations, and whether learners feel safe enough to take risks. Digital learning adds another layer. Learners may be engaged with English outside classroom through videos, games, social media, music, AI tools, or online communities. Some of that may be powerful. Some of it may be uneven, uncritical, or disconnected from classroom goals. So this links with our episode on AI and digital literacy, where we think about how teachers can support judgment rather than simply control technology use. So what can TESOL teachers do? First, design tasks with a clear purpose for engagement. Don't just ask, will students be busy or entertained? Ask, what will they need to notice, think about, say, decide, or negotiate. Second, look for different signs of engagement. Speaking matters, but so do attention, reflection, collaboration, questions, revision, and strategy use. Third, build in support. If learners are not engaging, it may not mean they are lazy or unmotivated. They may need clear goals, better language support, more thinking time, or a safer route into participation. And fourth, create small moments of reflection. Oh, that is very important. At the end of a task, ask what helped you learn. Where did you communicate? Where did communication break down? What language did you need but not have? What will you try next time? So let me end with our main takeaway from this episode. Engagement in TESOL is not just about visible participation. It's about meaningful involvement in language learning. Sometimes that involvement is spoken and social. Sometimes it's quiet and cognitive. Sometimes it's emotional, reflective, or agentic. Our job as teachers is not simply to make classroom look active. It is to design learning where students can think, interact, take risks, use language, and gradually take more control. If you have seen engagement work well in your own teaching, let me know in the comments below. What makes learners genuinely engage rather than simply complete the task? I'd love to hear about your experience. And if you want to follow this up, I'd recommend our video on scaffolding and the ZPD because it connects closely to the question of how teachers support learners into deeper participation. Thanks for listening.